Ahmed Al-Farouqi suspected his wife, Leila Mansour, of betrayal, but when palace surveillance footage revealed the truth, he discovered a web of dedication, secrecy, and integrity he never imagined. Ahmed Al-Farouqi was a name that commanded respect throughout Dubai's business corridors. As the founder of one of the city's most powerful real estate conglomerates, he had built an empire from the ground up, transforming empty plots of desert into soaring skyscrapers and luxury hotels that became the symbol of the city's ambition. His influence extended beyond real estate. He had stakes in energy ventures, private hospitals, and international investment funds. Every decision he made carried weight, and every public appearance was carefully orchestrated to project authority, confidence, and control. At home, his life was equally structured. The palace he shared with his family was outfitted with state-of-the-art security systems, private wings for family members, and meticulously trained staff. Everything was monitored, and yet, despite his efforts to maintain order, the first signs of unease began to surface quietly, almost imperceptibly. Leila Mansour, Ahmed's wife, was admired for her elegance, poise, and intelligence. She had a calm demeanor and a meticulous attention to detail, traits that complemented Ahmed's intense, driven personality. To the outside world, their marriage appeared flawless. A powerful husband, a supportive wife, and a bright young son named Sammy. Leila spent much of her time coordinating philanthropic events and managing charitable initiatives linked to the family foundation. Her days were filled with hospital visits, community projects, and social gatherings, all under the watchful eyes of the palace staff. At first, Ahmed appreciated her independence and the way she handled responsibilities without drawing attention. The first subtle signs that something might be amiss appeared in the routine of everyday life. Ahmed noticed that Leila had begun requesting private meetings away from his presence and that she often spent time in restricted areas of the palace, ostensibly working on charitable planning. She asked for more privacy with her phone and would occasionally step out under the pretense of errands or hospital visits without her usual entourage. Ahmed initially dismissed these as ordinary requests, natural for someone balancing public duties and personal projects, but over time the pattern became noticeable. Suspicion took root after a business dinner with foreign investors. Ahmed returned home to find that documents in his office had been moved. Nothing was missing, yet the disruption was enough to make him pause. Trust, something he had long taken for granted in both personal and professional life, suddenly seemed fragile. His meticulous nature compelled him to act. He instructed his security team to review surveillance footage and staff logs, looking for inconsistencies or unexplained behavior. The palace was equipped with an extensive network of cameras, monitoring every hallway, courtyard, and restricted area. Security personnel began a systematic review, combing through hours of footage to find anomalies. They documented every movement, noting times when Leila entered or exited sensitive areas, when staff shifted, and when unusual patterns appeared. At first, the analysts found nothing conclusive, but small details began to emerge. Shadows in corners, fleeting movements, and brief interactions with unidentified individuals who seemed to appear only when Leila was present. As days passed, Ahmed's anxiety grew. The once predictable rhythm of his home had shifted. Every creak in the hallway, every whisper of conversation, felt like a potential clue. Staff members, sensing his unease, acted cautiously, knowing that any misstep could be interpreted as part of a developing mystery. Ahmed's mind raced with questions. Was Leila hiding something? Was she betraying him personally, professionally, or both? Each unanswered question amplified his sense of urgency, setting the stage for a surveillance investigation that would soon uncover a truth far different from what he had feared. Ahmed's security team intensified their review, analyzing weeks of footage with painstaking precision. Every frame of the palace's corridors, staircases, and restricted rooms was examined, replayed, and cross-referenced with staff schedules. Analysts focused on moments when Leila moved between wings, visited the charity office, or received deliveries. At first, the unusual patterns seemed minor. A glance here, a hand lingering on a doorknob there. But small details can grow into large mysteries when viewed through the lens of suspicion. And for Ahmed, Each anomaly fed the narrative of possible betrayal. The turning point came when footage revealed a shadowy figure moving near Leila's private study during late evening hours. The figure was brief, almost imperceptible, slipping something small under the door before retreating into a corridor. Analysts paused, rewinding and enhancing the clip. The movements were deliberate, careful, almost secretive. Ahmed's heart sank. The evidence appeared damning. Questions raced through his mind. Who was the figure? What was inside the envelope? Why had Leila interacted with this person away from his presence? Digital forensics added another layer of concern. Leila's phone had briefly connected to unrecognized Wi-Fi networks during these same hours, leaving traces of encrypted communications. Analysts could not immediately determine whether these connections carried innocuous information or something more consequential. Every unanswered technical detail increased the tension within the palace. Ahmed began to imagine scenarios in which his wife could be working against him or compromising his business, imagining espionage, financial leaks, or personal betrayal. As analysts reconstructed timelines, it became clear that the shadowy figure's visits coincided with events Leila had orchestrated for her charitable projects. She had been coordinating private hospital donations, scheduling surprise educational grants, and ensuring delivery of medical supplies to remote clinics. The envelope, initially perceived as a suspicious package, contained schedules, authorization forms, and coordination notes meant to preserve confidentiality. Despite the innocent purpose, the visual impression of secretive movements fueled Ahmed's growing paranoia. Ahmed's advisors cautioned patience, emphasizing the importance of context. Security logs and timestamps were double-checked against charitable records, hospital staff schedules, and transportation logs. Analysts discovered that all actions had been pre-planned and approved. Every network connection Leila's phone made corresponded with legitimate operational needs for her projects. Yet, perception remained powerful. The grainy footage, combined with encrypted digital traces, created a story that seemed to confirm Ahmed's fears. Meanwhile, the palace atmosphere grew tense. Staff became more alert, aware that their movements and access were being scrutinized under the microscope of suspicion. Leila, unaware of the surveillance review and Ahmed's growing doubts, continued her daily routine, attending hospital visits, hosting meetings for education and healthcare initiatives, and spending quality time with her son, Sammy. Her outward calm contrasted sharply with the escalating anxiety behind closed doors. Ahmed's legal team prepared contingency strategies, debating the potential consequences if the perceived betrayal were real. Financial implications, public perception, and family stability were all considered. The palace, once a sanctuary, had become a stage for unseen tensions and imagined threats. As the hours passed, Ahmed's focus narrowed on one pressing question. Had he misjudged the woman he trusted most, or was the surveillance about to reveal a truth more shocking than he could imagine? The stage was set for revelation, and the truth was closer than he realized, waiting to overturn every assumption. The deeper investigation into the palace footage began to reveal subtle but telling details. Every envelope, every whispered movement, every late-night corridor crossing was replayed and analyzed. Initially, the presence of the shadowy figure delivering small packages to Leila's private study seemed incriminating. Ahmed's mind raced with possibilities of personal betrayal or corporate sabotage. Yet, as analysts cross-referenced the movements with internal schedules, hospital reports, and charitable activity logs, the picture began to shift. The mysterious deliveries coincided with dates when Leila had arranged surprise aid packages for local hospitals, schools, and underprivileged communities. Each envelope contained schedules, permissions, and detailed instructions necessary for coordinating these events. Documents that needed to be kept private until the projects were executed. The figure itself, initially considered a potential threat, was identified as Omar Rashid, a longtime assistant for one of Leila's nonprofit initiatives. Omar had been entrusted to handle confidential correspondence and coordinate logistical details for projects spanning multiple locations. His presence in the palace during the evening hours, which had previously seemed suspicious, was routine for someone in his role. Security analysts, initially wary, now began to see that what appeared to be clandestine activity was, in fact, procedural oversight. Further examination of Leila's encrypted phone connections revealed similar clarity. Every brief connection to unknown networks matched approved methods for transmitting sensitive data to nonprofit partners. These encrypted channels ensured that the schedules and patient information Leila handled were not exposed to the public before events occurred. The data did not indicate espionage or betrayal, but highlighted her meticulous attention to confidentiality. As analysts pieced together a comprehensive timeline, more evidence of Leila's diligence emerged. Footage captured her personally delivering care packages to hospital wards, visiting children's clinics, and confirming that educational materials reached the intended recipients. Every action in the grainy video, previously interpreted as secretive or suspicious, was a snapshot of dedication and professionalism. Even the moments when she appeared alone in restricted corridors were moments of careful planning, ensuring the success of initiatives that would later be revealed publicly. Ahmed, watching the compiled footage with his advisors, experienced a complex mixture of relief and regret. For weeks, he had imagined betrayals in every shadow, questioned her loyalty, and mobilized palace security under the assumption that his wife might be working against him. Now, the evidence painted an entirely different story. A woman exercising responsibility, foresight, and compassion. Every grainy frame that once suggested secrecy now revealed purpose. The revelation highlighted a critical lesson for Ahmed. Surveillance, while powerful, could distort reality when stripped of context. Observing only actions without understanding intent had transformed ordinary procedural work into a perceived threat. His advisors emphasized that trust and communication were as essential as security in maintaining both personal and professional stability. As the palace settled into this new understanding, the tension began to ease. Staff who had feared scrutiny returned to normal routines. Leila continued her work, still unaware of the weeks-long investigation into her actions. Ahmed, meanwhile, reflected on how easily suspicion could override perception. What had started as a search for betrayal had ended in an unexpected discovery. The truth was far more honorable and transparent than he had imagined. The grainy footage, once a tool of anxiety, now stood as a testament to Leila's integrity and careful stewardship of the projects that defined her purpose. Ahmed called a full review meeting with his advisors, senior security personnel, and palace staff to go over the surveillance findings. Every frame of the grainy footage, every timestamp, every movement of envelopes and papers was projected on screens for detailed analysis. Analysts reconstructed every late-night corridor visit, every shadowy figure, and every digital connection. Slowly, the true nature of the events began to emerge. The mysterious deliveries were not secret messages, illicit transactions, or evidence of betrayal. They were the careful coordination of charitable work. Ahmed watched, astonished, as the same grainy images that had fueled his suspicions now revealed Leila personally overseeing the distribution of aid packages, checking supplies in hospital wings, and confirming that gifts and resources reached children and families across Dubai. The envelope deliveries, once assumed to be clandestine, were routine. Omar Rashid, the assistant seen repeatedly on the footage, was part of Leila's approved non-profit team. His presence in the palace during late hours was required for logistical coordination, especially when projects involved multiple locations and tight timelines. Every action he took was authorized, planned, and necessary to ensure the success of initiatives that were meant to remain confidential until they could be publicly unveiled. What had looked suspicious in isolation now made perfect sense in context. Ahmed's advisors carefully walked him through the digital evidence as well. Encrypted phone connections, network activity, and brief data transfers all corresponded to legitimate communications with charitable partners. There were no hidden messages, no evidence of leaking sensitive financial information, and no signs of personal betrayal. The perceived irregularities had been nothing more than operational necessities. Leila had maintained strict confidentiality to protect the integrity of her projects, not to deceive her husband. The palace staff, who had been tense under Ahmed's watchful eye, also began to relax as the truth became clear. Their movements, previously scrutinized as potential signs of collusion or complicity, were now understood as part of normal operational procedures. Security officers realized that they had been interpreting professional behavior through a lens of suspicion rather than objective observation. Ahmed himself faced a mixture of relief and embarrassment. For weeks, he had imagined the worst: betrayal, deception, and personal and professional compromise. He had ordered hours of surveillance review, mobilized staff to monitor private communications, and questioned the loyalty of those closest to him. The reality was far more mundane but also far more admirable. Leila had been acting with foresight, dedication, and integrity, orchestrating complex charitable projects that required secrecy and precise execution. As the review meeting concluded, Ahmed understood the depth of the lesson. Surveillance could reveal actions but not intent. Without context, even the most innocent and honorable deeds could be misinterpreted. Grainy images, shadows, and encrypted connections could create illusions of wrongdoing where none existed. Trust, communication, and understanding were as critical as security systems in preserving relationships and maintaining perspective. By the end of the day, the palace atmosphere had shifted. The tension that had gripped the family and staff eased. Leila's work continued uninterrupted, now with full acknowledgement of its importance and transparency. Ahmed, humbled by his assumptions, began to restore trust, realizing that the woman he had feared had betrayed him was, in fact, acting with unwavering integrity, and the palace had learned that perception could often mislead even the most vigilant observer. In the weeks following the revelation, Ahmed reflected deeply on the events that had unfolded. What had begun as suspicion and fear had evolved into a profound lesson about trust, perception, and the limitations of surveillance. The grainy footage that once seemed to confirm betrayal had instead revealed the meticulous care, diligence, and integrity of his wife, Leila. Every corridor she walked, every envelope delivered, every encrypted message transmitted had been part of her well-planned charitable projects. Ahmed realized that his assumptions had been guided more by anxiety than evidence, and that wealth and power, while protective in many ways, could also distort perception when emotions intervened. The palace began to adjust to the newfound clarity. Security protocols were maintained but refined to emphasize context and communication rather than only observation. Staff were briefed on the findings, learning that routine operations and standard procedures should never be misinterpreted as suspicious without proper verification. Analysts who had spent weeks scrutinizing footage understood that even high-resolution surveillance could not capture intent, only action. Ahmed implemented a system where major decisions or unusual actions would first be clarified through dialogue before raising alarms. Leila, when informed of the investigation and its findings, was initially stunned. She had no idea that her late-night coordination, her careful supervision of deliveries, and her management of confidential communications had been misread as potential betrayal. Yet, she approached the revelation calmly, understanding the pressures Ahmed faced in balancing his business empire and family security. Together, they discussed the importance of transparency and communication moving forward, agreeing that while secrecy was sometimes necessary for professional or charitable work, it must be paired with trust to prevent misunderstandings. Publicly, the palace maintained discretion, framing the incident as part of normal operational adjustments. There was no scandal, no breach, and no public accusation. Internally, however, the experience left an indelible mark. Ahmed became more aware of the human element in all his security measures, recognizing that technology, no matter how advanced, could never replace judgment, empathy, or trust. Staff morale improved as the tension of weeks-long scrutiny eased, and the household returned to its normal rhythm. Leila resumed her charitable initiatives with renewed vigor. Now that the misunderstanding had been resolved, she could operate with confidence and transparency. Ahmed occasionally joined her on visits, witnessing firsthand the impact of her work and gaining a deeper appreciation for her dedication and foresight. The palace, once a stage for suspicion and anxiety, became a place of collaboration and respect, where trust and careful oversight existed in balance. The episode also became a private lesson for Ahmed. Perception is fragile, and assumptions can create crises where none exist. Trust, once strained, could be repaired through evidence, communication, and humility. The grainy footage that had once caused fear now served as a record of integrity, a reminder that even in a world of wealth, power, and constant surveillance, human behavior and intent cannot always be fully captured on camera. In the end, Ahmed realized that the truth had not been hidden by deceit, but had been waiting patiently behind the veil of meticulous, honorable action, ready to reveal itself when seen in proper context. The incident left both husband and wife stronger, more understanding of each other, and prepared to face the future with renewed trust and perspective, knowing that vigilance and empathy must coexist in equal measure.